You didn't land here by accident. Maybe something inside you has been stirring, quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a frequency just beyond the edge of your hearing. Maybe you've been waking up in the middle of the night with a heaviness you can't name. Or maybe you've started to notice this strange rhythm of your life, how it keeps circling back to the same patterns, the same longings, the same unanswered questions. This isn't coincidence. It's a call, a pull from something beyond what you can see. And you've felt it, haven't you? That whisper that says, there's more than the routine, more than the rules, more than the life you've been taught to settle for. This isn't a story about manifesting stuff into your life, cars, cash, success. This is a journey into remembering who you truly are beneath the programming, the noise, and the timelines you didn't consciously choose. This is about shifting your frequency so completely that the universe has no choice but to meet you there. Not because you're demanding, but because you become a match. You're not here to get something. You are here to become something. You're not broken. You're not lost. You are a vibrational being, living in a sea of infinite potential. And somewhere in that sea, the version of you you've always dreamed of, the version of you who is free, who is whole, who is powerful beyond measure, is already alive. That version of you isn't in the future. It's right here, now. The question is, can you remember how to tune in? The truth is, most people never make this shift. Not because they can't, but because they're addicted to the familiar, addicted to the safety of who they think they are. Your nervous system is wired for survival, not expansion. Your subconscious is a perfect record keeper, looping stories, wounds, fears, and identities from every past version of you. And every time you try to leap forward, those older versions whisper, it's not safe. So you hesitate, you question, you shrink. And the field, this beautiful, mysterious, intelligent field, simply mirrors back that frequency. Not to punish you, not to test you, but because it's precise. But what if you stopped trying to get somewhere and instead started becoming the signal? What if you remembered that your reality isn't happening to you, it's responding to you? What if every thought, every emotion, every breath, every expectation was already casting ripples into the fabric of the quantum field, calling back to you a version of life that perfectly matches your inner state? What if the universe wasn't a machine you had to hack, but a mirror, a living consciousness waiting to respond to your clarity? What if you've been waiting for the door to open, not realizing you are the door? This isn't about magic tricks. It's not about 5 steps to manifest faster. This is about quantum alignment, about collapsing the timeline where your highest self already exists, not by effort, but by embodiment. You're not here to force a new life into being. You're here to dissolve the frequency of the old one, gently, intentionally, with love. This book isn't a map. It's a mirror. And if you're brave enough to look into it, you won't just find information. You'll find yourself. The self that has always been there beneath the roles you play, the beliefs you inherited, the limitations you unconsciously agreed to. The self that remembers. The self that knows. So before we begin, I want to offer you something far more powerful than motivation or strategy. Permission. Permission to leave behind what no longer resonates. Permission to stop performing. Permission to stop fighting your reality and instead tune it. You are the tuning fork, the wave, the observer, and the field is listening. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Invisible Call. There are moments in life when something shifts, not outside but deep within. A flicker, a tightening in the chest, a pause you can't explain. It doesn't come with fireworks or thunder. It arrives in silence. And in that silence, a question rises like breath from beneath the surface. Is this all there is? You may be brushing your teeth. driving to work, staring out a window at nothing in particular. But something cracks open, a moment of stillness, and suddenly the world you've been living in feels thinner, less certain, like you've been walking inside a dream that's trying to wake you. That's the call. Not a voice, not a command, but a frequency. It doesn't shout. It hums. Low, steady, familiar, though you've never heard it before. And once you've felt it, you can't unfeel it. Once you've heard it, you begin to notice all the ways your life has been running on autopilot. All the choices made from fear. All the dreams traded for security. All the moments you looked away from yourself to belong to something smaller. You start to realize you've been living a timeline you didn't consciously choose. A script someone else handed you. A loop your nervous system memorized. And the more you sense it, the louder that call becomes. Not in volume, but in intensity. Like the sound of a song you once loved but forgot. Like a home you've never been to, but ache for in your bones. That ache isn't emptiness. It's memory. You are remembering what it means to choose your frequency. We've been taught to believe reality is something out there, fixed, unmoving, objective. But what if it isn't? What if reality isn't a wall you run into, but a mirror responding to your vibration? What if your entire life has been a reflection, not of your desires, but of your dominant energy? Your thoughts? Yes, but deeper still, your emotions, your expectations, your posture, your breath, your subconscious signature. You've been calling your life to you every single day, not with your words, but with your being. This is the essence of quantum alignment. Reality does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are. And what you are is not static. It shifts. It evolves. It tunes. You're a frequency generator, constantly casting signals into the quantum field. And that field, vast, intelligent, unconditionally responsive, mirrors it all back. This is not metaphor. This is mechanics. This is physics, mysticism, and embodiment, all converging into one simple truth. You are the signal. But if that's true, if reality is shaped by frequency, then why does it feel so hard to change? Because the old frequency is safe, familiar, rehearsed, even if it hurts, even if it suffocates you. There's comfort in what you know. Your body knows it. Your breath adjusts to it. Your nervous system, trained to recognize patterns of tension, worry, survival, loops it again and again. Not because it wants to trap you, but because it wants to protect you. The subconscious doesn't chase dreams. It chases safety. And until you feel safe to expand, until your system feels safe to release the old self, you'll keep collapsing into the same timeline over and over again. This is why mindset alone is not enough. This is why affirmations without nervous system alignment fall flat. This is why you can want a new life and still live the old one. The shift begins not in the mind, but in the body. Not in belief, but in being. And here's the paradox. The timeline you're trying to manifest, it's not in the future. It's already vibrating in the field. Right now, right here. Every version of you that ever existed, and every version that could exist, is encoded in the quantum sea. It's not about creating from nothing. It's about collapsing the wave into form. It's about tuning in so precisely that the field has no choice but to meet you there. You don't chase timelines. You match them. And to match a frequency, you must first notice the one you're currently carrying. So ask yourself, when you walk into a room, what do people feel? What does your presence say before your mouth opens? What emotion lingers in your breath when no one's watching? Because that is your real broadcast. You don't manifest from thought. You manifest from vibration. Let's pause here. Take a breath, not a shallow one. A full, present inhale. Let your body hear what your mind is starting to understand. This is the moment the shift begins. Not later, not after the next chapter. Now, because now is the only place the field can hear you. Now is the only place where transformation is possible. Not tomorrow, not when it's all perfect, not once I figure everything out. Now is the doorway, and you just put your hand on the handle. The truth is, most people don't respond to the call. They hear it, yes, but they override it. They convince themselves it's irrational, that it can wait, that life is fine, and fine should be enough. And so they go back to sleep, eyes open, heart closed. They return to jobs that drain them, relationships that diminish them, beliefs that do not belong to them. Not because they're weak, but because they're conditioned. Because somewhere along the way, they were taught that longing is dangerous, that desire is selfish, that safety lies in sameness. But you're different. You kept listening. You followed the quiet thread, even when it made no sense. Even when the path ahead was blurry and no one around you could understand. You didn't come here to chase shadows of what you already know. You came here to remember what your soul never forgot. That you are more than a name, more than a body, more than a history. You're a consciousness in motion, an echo of the eternal, a tuning fork for reality. And the reason you feel the call so deeply is because you're standing in the doorway between timelines. One is known, predictable, safe. The other is wild, alive, resonant with your highest frequency, and utterly unknown to your nervous system. And so you stand caught between two vibrations, the frequency of what was, and the frequency of what could be. This moment, this tension is sacred. To move forward, you must understand the most powerful force that anchors you to the old timeline. Your subconscious. Your subconscious is not a saboteur, is a protector, is the part of you that learned long ago what it took to survive. It remembers every rejection, every silence, every moment you chose to shrink instead of shine. It holds your emotional blueprints like sacred maps. And those maps say, this is how we stay safe. This is how we stay small enough not to be hurt again. But here's the problem. Those maps are outdated. They were drawn by a version of you that no longer exists. And as long as those blueprints remain unexamined, they run your life. Not because you are broken, but because you are brilliant. Because your mind, your body, your nervous system, all of it is trying to protect you from pain. Even if that means rejecting joy. Even if that means staying invisible. Even if that means saying, I want change, while still broadcasting, but only if it's safe. And here's what most people don't realize. The field doesn't listen to your mouth. It listens to your energy. You can say, I'm ready for abundance. But if your breath tightens every time you think about money, if your shoulders tense when you imagine receiving more, if your body is still holding the shame of lack, then your frequency says, I'm not safe to receive. You can say, I want love. But if your heart is still armored, if your subconscious expects abandonment, if your nervous system is still trained to brace and self-protect, then your vibration says, love is dangerous. This is not a failure. It's a call for integration. It's your system inviting you to tune, not force. To become the signal, not manipulate the mirror. Let's shift our perspective. What if these old emotional programs weren't obstacles, but invitations? What if the fear, the contraction, the grief? What if they were sacred messages from within? Not enemies to fight, but frequencies to feel and then release. Because here's the real secret of a shift. You don't get to the new timeline by fighting the old. You don't ascend by rejecting who you've been. You rise by becoming the space that can hold it all, without collapsing into any of it. You rise by saying, yes, I see you, and still, I choose differently. And this choosing, this delicate, moment-by-moment recalibration, is what reshapes your reality. No, it's not dramatic. No, it's not instant, but it is quantum, and quantum shifts don't always begin with explosions. Sometimes they begin with stillness, with a breath, with a pause, with a decision to stop abandoning yourself, even for a moment. And so here you are, in the pause between one world and the next, in the liminal space where the old identity is dissolving and a new one hasn't yet solidified. This place is uncomfortable, yes, but it is holy. This is the womb of transformation. And if you can stay awake here, if you can keep your frequency tuned to becoming instead of escaping, then the shift becomes inevitable. Not because you force it, but because you no longer resist it. And in that surrender, the field responds. Not in years, not in months, but in now. Because the field doesn't operate on time. It operates on resonance. And you are beginning to resonate with the truth of who you really are. You're no longer trying to become. You are remembering you already are. And that is the call answered. Chapter 2. You were never meant to stay small. There's a particular kind of pain that doesn't scream. It whispers. It lingers in the tightness of your chest when someone asks, "What do you really want?" It flickers behind your eyes when you laugh at a dream, pretending you never believed in it. It hides beneath politeness, perfectionism, overachievement, all the strategies we've adopted to avoid the unbearable truth. That somewhere along the way, we learned to make ourselves small. We shrunk our voice so we wouldn't disrupt. We dimmed our light so we wouldn't be judged. We edited our truth so we wouldn't be abandoned. And at some point, we forgot we were doing it. It became automatic, habitual, safe, but it was never natural. You weren't born to play small. No one looks at a child and says, "Don't dream too big." No soul enters this world thinking, "Let me just survive." You came here encoded with a frequency of expansion, of wild potential, of sacred individuality. But the world didn't know how to hold that. So it taught you how to contain yourself. And like all brilliant beings, you adapted. You learned to belong by shrinking, to be loved by pleasing, to stay safe by disappearing. Not because you were weak, but because you were wise. Your system knew how to survive, even if it meant silencing your own brilliance. But survival is not your purpose, and contraction is not your destiny. There's a version of you, vast, radiant, unafraid, that never left. It's still there behind the masks, beneath the coping, inside the tension you've been carrying for so long. You forgot what it feels like to be free, but your soul hasn't forgotten. It's been speaking to you in symbols, in synchronicities, in breakdowns that weren't punishments, but invitations. Invitations to stop performing, to stop conforming, to stop contorting your infinite self to fit into finite spaces. Because the world doesn't need another perfectly aligned life on Instagram. It needs your real light, your unfiltered essence, your unapologetic becoming. Here's the truth no one teaches us. When you abandon yourself to be accepted, you are not loved. You are managed. When you silence your truth to keep the peace, you don't create harmony. You create distance between you and your soul. And when you live your life on someone else's script, you may find success, but you will feel like a stranger inside your own skin. You cannot manifest your highest timeline while living from a version of you that was built to survive a world that no longer exists. Let that land. The habits, the patterns, the voice in your head that says, "Don't be too much." They were born in a different time, shaped by people who didn't know how to love their own light, and so couldn't teach you to love yours. But just because you inherited a frequency doesn't mean you have to keep broadcasting it. You can pause. You can retune. You can say, "This story ends with me." And that's not rebellion. That's remembrance. You're not creating a new self. You're reclaiming the one that was always there, buried beneath expectations, shame, and roles you were never meant to play. You are not broken. You are buried, and you are beginning to rise. Most people believe their identity is who they are. But identity, as the quantum field shows us, is not fixed. It's not a truth, it's a frequency. And that frequency is shaped not by logic or intention, but by emotion. You don't become who you are through thinking. You become who you are through what you feel repeatedly. Emotion is what imprints your being. Emotion is what codes your field. This is why a single moment of shame in childhood can shape 20 years of silence. This is why a single belief, uttered by someone who could not see your light, "You're too much. You'll never make it. That's not realistic," can take root in your nervous system and echo for a lifetime. And yet this is also why one moment of truth felt fully in the body can unravel decades of contraction, because the body doesn't need long explanations. It needs resonance. And this is where the real work begins. You do not shift timelines through effort. You shift them through energetic coherence. You must become the version of you who no longer contracts in the presence of power, who no longer apologizes for her voice, who no longer second-guesses his intuition, just because it doesn't fit into a model of safety the world prefers. This is not about rebellion for the sake of drama. This is about resonance for the sake of freedom. So how do you begin? Not by declaring who you want to be, but by feeling where you still aren't free. Sit with this. Ask yourself gently, where do I still shrink to make others comfortable? Where does my voice tremble, not from emotion, but from inherited fear? Where have I confused safety with silence? You see, the body is a map, and the contractions are the clues. Every tightening is a frequency. Every flinch is a broadcast. Every hesitation is a signal to the field. I'm not ready, but you are. Not because the world said so. Not because your bank account says so. Not because you have everything figured out. You're ready because the call has already begun. You're ready because you're already listening. And when you listen long enough, you realize that the pain of staying small is far greater than the fear of growing big. Here's a secret. You don't need to kill your ego. You don't need to crush the part of you that protected you. You need to thank it, because that small self, the one who survived, who hid, who compromised, did its job beautifully. It kept you safe. But now it's time to update the program, because you're not living in the world that hurt you anymore. You're creating a new one, not just around you, but through you. And that world needs your whole signal, not a filtered version, not a dimmed-down echo. Your full, unapologetic, beautifully coherent self. The self that's been waiting beneath the layers. The self that remembers who you are, not because someone told you, but because your being knows. And once you begin to live from that place, even for a moment, the field listens. Reality shifts, not as a reward, but as a reflection. You were never meant to stay small. You were meant to unfold, to awaken, to take up the exact space your soul was designed to fill. Not by force, not by fight, but by truth, by standing in the frequency of who you already are and letting the world catch up. Chapter 3, The Dance of Possibility. Somewhere in the space between your inhale and your next thought, 1,000 versions of you are waiting. Not in the future, not in some faraway realm. They're here, now, dancing just outside the visible spectrum like whispers made of light. This is the truth the mind struggles to grasp, but the soul has always known. Reality is not fixed. It is fluid. It is frequency. And you're not a passive character trapped in a pre-written story. You're a sculptor of timelines. At every moment, you are weaving one strand of possibility into form. With your focus, your attention, your expectation, your vibration. This is not theory. It is the living intelligence of the quantum field. In quantum mechanics, they call it the wave function. The idea that all possible realities exist as probabilities until observed. Before the observation, reality is pure potential. After the observation, reality is form. Collapse. But here's what most people don't realize. You are the observer, but you're also the filter. You don't see reality as it is. You see it as you are. You collapse the wave, not only through vision, but through vibration. You don't attract what you want. You collapse into what you are aligned with. This is not the law of attraction. This is the law of coherence. Let's make this real. Think of a radio. It's surrounded by countless frequencies: rock, jazz, classical, silence. They're all there all the time, but you only hear what you tune to. You don't make the music appear. You don't create the station. You just match its frequency. Reality is the same. You don't create love. You tune into it. You don't create abundance. You attune your body to the signal of, I am safe to receive. You don't force your healing. You collapse into the version of you that has already remembered their wholeness. But tuning is subtle. It's not about force. It's about fidelity. You can't say, I trust, while vibrating fear. You can't visualize joy while bracing for betrayal. You can't affirm freedom while your body is still enslaved to an old nervous system pattern that tells you it's not safe to be seen. This is why the field often doesn't respond to your rituals. Because your rituals are layered in contradiction. The mouth says yes. The body says no. The mind imagines, but the heart hides. And the field, it mirrors the strongest frequency. Not the loudest, not the most poetic, the most consistent. So if 5% of you says, I believe, but 95% of you is still looping old fear, guess which signal gets mirrored? This is not a flaw. This is precision. But don't misunderstand. This doesn't mean you have to become perfect. It doesn't mean you need to eliminate all fear or dissolve every contradiction. What it means is this: your power begins when you become aware of the frequency you are currently carrying and begin to shift it with intention. You don't need to fake joy. You need to find presence. You don't need to recite 1,000 affirmations. You need to feel one truth deeply in your chest, your breath, your belly. And the moment you do, the field shifts. Not tomorrow, not when you've earned it. Now, because now is where all timelines live. Now is the only real portal. Let's pause here. Let's return to the idea of observation. In the quantum world, what you observe becomes real. Not because you're imagining it into existence, but because your attention is the trigger that collapses possibility into form. But what is observation really? It is not just looking. It is bringing presence into focus. It is the full investment of your awareness into a particular frequency until the field begins to reflect it back in matter. You do this constantly, unconsciously, with emotions, thoughts, and expectations. Your life is not shaped by the things you think about once in a while. It's shaped by the things you feel into regularly. And every time you revisit a belief, especially one charged with emotion, you reinforce it as reality. Not because it is objectively true, but because your attention made it real. This is why fear often feels like prophecy. Why doubt seems justified. Why limitation becomes believable. You're not being punished. You're just collapsing the same wave over and over. But attention, when mastered, becomes your most sacred creative tool. When you bring full, regulated, conscious attention to a new timeline, to the version of you who is already whole, already aligned, you begin to pull it from the field of potential into the field of form. Not through force, not through speed, but through fidelity. The quantum does not respond to ambition. It responds to coherence. And coherence is born in stillness. Let's talk about stillness. In a culture addicted to motion, stillness can feel like failure. We are taught that if we aren't hustling, proving, striving, We are falling behind. But in the quantum field, stillness is not an action. Stillness is alignment. It is the state in which your entire being, your breath, your cells, your mind, your heart, is vibrating in a single clear direction. Stillness isn't passive. It's powerful. Stillness is how you become an open portal for the frequency you wish to inhabit. It is the place where you stop broadcasting contradiction and start becoming the signal itself. When you are still, the noise subsides. When you are still, the field can finally hear you. And when the field hears you, clearly, cleanly, with no distortion, it responds, not slowly, not reluctantly, but immediately, precisely. The delay you experience in your life is not because the field isn't working. It's because your signal has been fragmented. You've been asking for love while preparing for abandonment. You've been visualizing abundance while bracing for loss. You've been calling and healing while identifying with your wound. And the field doesn't take sides. It reflects. So the question is not, why hasn't it happened yet? The question is, which version of me is the field currently mirroring? This is not about shame. It's about awakening. Because the moment you realize that you are the origin point, the moment you stop waiting for permission, you begin to reclaim your true role in this dance of possibility. You are not here to chase what you want. You are here to remember you're already entangled with it. And entanglement, that sacred quantum principle, means that the you who already has what you seek is not distant, not separate, not unreachable. They are vibrating right now in the field, waiting not for you to find them, but to become them. And you become them through resonance, through breath, through presence, through choosing moment by moment to think, speak, move, and feel as though the shift has already occurred. Because in the field, there is no waiting. There is only matching. So sit with this. Let your breath become an instrument of tuning. Let your attention become a thread you place gently into the version of reality you wish to inhabit. Not as escape, not as fantasy, but as embodiment. You are not imagining the timeline. You are collapsing into it. And once you do, once your frequency becomes stable, the field doesn't just respond. It reorganizes. Chapter 4, The Observer Effect. There is a story you've been told your entire life. It goes something like this. Reality is objective. Things happen. You react. You try your best to survive or succeed. And maybe, just maybe, you get lucky. But this story is incomplete. Because in the world behind the visible, in the intelligence beneath form, there is another truth. You are not simply reacting to reality. You are selecting it. At every moment, you are not only participating in your life, you are shaping it, choosing it, not always consciously, but always energetically. You are not just seeing the world, you are observing it into being. This is the observer effect. In quantum physics, it tells us something astonishing. Particles exist in a state of pure potential, waves undefined, until they are observed. Only then do they choose a location, a form, a path. Before the observation, everything is possible. After, one reality collapsed into matter. But the field doesn't just respond to sight. It responds to attention, to focus, to frequency. It responds to the internal state of the observer. So when we say you are the observer, we're not speaking of the conscious mind alone. We're speaking of something deeper, the whole system through which you meet the moment. Because if you are 5% consciously choosing abundance, but 95% of your nervous system is still entangled in scarcity, guess what becomes real? Not the dream, the imprint. You are observing reality with your breath, with your posture, with the temperature of your emotions, with the unspoken expectations that live beneath your words. You may not realize it, but you're observing your life into form. With every moment you brace, every memory you replay, every assumption you carry. And that's not punishment. That's design. The field isn't punishing you for doubting. It's simply responding to the signal that doubt produces. It isn't delaying your desire. It's mirroring the version of you who doesn't fully trust they're worthy of it yet. And once you understand this, truly understand it, you stop chasing your future and begin observing from your future. That's the shift. The real work of manifestation isn't to force a reality into place. It's to refine the observer, to become so coherent in your body, your thoughts, your energy, that the field has no choice but to collapse in your favor. Because it isn't responding to your desire. It's responding to your alignment. Let that land. This means that every moment of panic, every spiral of doubt, every habit of contraction, these are not failures. They are simply evidence of the current observer at work. And that observer isn't wrong. They're just outdated. You see, the observer you are today was built over time, through repetition, through emotional encoding, through years of witnessing the world in a particular way and calling it truth. You're not seeing the world as it is. You're seeing it as your subconscious remembers it to be. And your subconscious remembers in feeling, not in words. This is why trying to affirm your way into a new reality often doesn't work. Because the observer hasn't changed. The frequency hasn't changed. The emotional weight of your observation hasn't shifted. You're trying to speak a new reality with the same internal witness that created the old one. And the field responds to that witness, not the wish. So what do? You begin to shift the observer from the inside out. Not by willpower, not by pretending, but by becoming present with the patterns that are still collapsing old timelines and learning how to soften them, update them, retune them. This is where the real magic happens. When you start feeling differently in the same situations. When your nervous system stops bracing. When your subconscious stops looping fear. When your body begins to trust the new frequency. Not because you forced it, but because you became it. Every moment you experience is filtered through memory, but not the kind of memory stored only in your mind. We're talking about a more ancient memory, the kind stored in your muscles, your breath, your heart rhythm, the kind of memory that doesn't speak in sentences, it speaks in states. This is emotional memory, and it is the hidden architect of your reality. You might not remember exactly what happened at age 7, but your body does. It remembers how to flinch when someone raises their voice. It remembers how to tighten your stomach when you feel seen. It remembers the exact frequency of rejection and how to protect you from it. And this is how the observer, your internal witness, is shaped. Not by logic, but by repetition, by what was felt as true again and again, until it became a baseline vibration. So even now, as you try to create a new reality, you're doing so through the lens of the past. Not because you're unwilling to change, but because the nervous system doesn't update through willpower. It updates through safety. If the observer believes that success will make you unsafe, you'll sabotage success. If the observer believes that intimacy equals abandonment, you'll block connection. If the observer believes that joy is fleeting, you'll unconsciously dull your own light to avoid disappointment. This is not your fault. This is your design, a system designed to survive, but now being asked to evolve. So how do we shift the observer? We do it gently. We do it through felt experience, not force. We begin by practicing what the subconscious never got to experience, a new emotional baseline. We don't start with affirmations. We start with nervous system regulation, with presence, with breath, with learning to sit with what once triggered collapse and staying soft. You cannot shift the quantum while your system is still in survival. The field doesn't care what you say you want. It mirrors what you feel safe to receive. So we make safety sacred. Here's where embodiment comes in. Let's say you're trying to shift into a timeline of abundance. Your old observer is wired to anticipate loss. So when money comes in, your body braces. When opportunity appears, you flinch. Now, you might say, I am wealthy, but the field doesn't hear your words. It hears your nervous system. So you begin the real work. You breathe when the fear arises. You soften when the old pattern tightens. You allow your body to feel safe in expansion. That is how the observer begins to rewire. Not by denial, by integration. You teach your system a new way to be in the same circumstance. And as you do, something begins to happen. The outside world subtly shifts. Synchronicities emerge. You receive what you would have previously pushed away. People respond to you differently. Life starts echoing the new signal, not because you manipulated the field, but because you became coherent. And coherence, emotional, energetic, physiological coherence, is the language of the quantum. It's when your thoughts, feelings, and actions move in the same direction. It's when the observer becomes clear, and so the field can reflect clearly in return. This is how timelines shift, not through wishing, not through controlling, but through stabilizing a new vibrational identity, through becoming the kind of observer who no longer carries the weight of contradiction. And when that happens, when your system stops expecting the old reality, when your emotional memory is no longer filtering the world through pain, you collapse into something new, not because the field changed, but because you did. So ask yourself, what is the frequency I'm observing from? Is it one of readiness or one of waiting? Is it one of wholeness or one of lack? Is it one of coherence or fragmentation? Because the answer to that question is the answer to what will collapse next. Chapter 5, feel it first. Before the money arrives, before the love arrives, before the healing arrives, you must feel it, not because emotion is decoration, but because emotion is the key. Most people misunderstand this. They think emotion is a reward, that once their circumstances change, they'll finally get to feel peace, joy, confidence, love. But the field doesn't work that way. The field doesn't wait for the external to validate the internal. It mirrors what the internal makes real. In the quantum world, the emotion comes first. The signal comes first. The vibration comes first. Only then does the wave collapse into form. You've heard it said, act as if. But it's not about acting. It's about feeling as if. It's about training your nervous system, your body, your breath, to embody the emotional frequency of the timeline you wish to live in. This is not fantasy. It's not pretending. It's physics, because your emotion is a frequency, and the field is listening. It doesn't understand English or Spanish or even words. It understands energy. It understands coherence. And the most magnetic emotional signal you can send to the field is this: I already am. This is the great reversal. You've been taught to wait. Wait until the bank account changes to feel secure. Wait until the right person arrives to feel loved. Wait until the healing occurs to feel whole. But in the quantum, waiting is repelling, because the frequency of waiting is the frequency of not yet. And the field doesn't respond to what you want. It reflects what you are. If your dominant state is, I'm not there yet, then the field will continue to mirror timelines. We are not there yet, but the moment, the exact moment, you stop broadcasting lack and start embodying presence, something shifts. You begin to send a different signal, a signal of readiness, a signal of alignment, a signal of truth, and the field begins to rearrange, not because you forced it, but because you stop contradicting it. So how do you feel at first? When nothing around you supports the feeling, This is the sacred practice. This is the heart of embodiment. It begins not in the mind, but in the body. You do not think your way into alignment. You breathe into it. You posture into it. You anchor it through repetition, trust, and internal permission. You begin by asking, how would I breathe if I trusted it was already mine? How would I walk, speak, rest if I knew I was safe to receive it? How will my body feel if it had already arrived? And then you practice that feeling, not once, but until it becomes the new emotional baseline, until your system recognizes it as normal. Because once the feeling is familiar, the field mirrors it back as form, not because it's a trick, but because coherence is the law. Let's begin here. Emotion is not just an effect of experience. Emotion is the experience. When you remember a joyful moment from your past, your body doesn't know it's a memory. It feels the chemistry now. The breath deepens. The heart opens. The nervous system softens. In that moment, past and present collapse. Likewise, when you rehearse a future emotionally, your body begins to believe it's already happening. This is not fantasy. This is neurological fact. The subconscious doesn't distinguish between imagination and reality. It responds to feeling. So when you practice feeling it first, you are not lying to yourself. You are priming the field. You are signaling to your subconscious. This is who we are now. And when your inner world accepts it, your outer world has no choice but to catch up. This is why the practice of emotional rehearsal is so powerful. You don't just visualize outcomes. You feel into them. You close your eyes. You breathe as if. You see yourself waking up inside the timeline that once felt like a distant dream. You feel it in your spine, in your heartbeat, in the small, ordinary details of daily life. Not chasing the extraordinary, but anchoring into the normalcy of the miraculous. The key isn't intensity. The key is familiarity. You don't need to feel ecstasy. You need to feel home in that state. Because what's familiar becomes magnetic, and what's magnetic becomes inevitable. Now let's talk about one of the most misunderstood frequencies in this entire conversation. Gratitude. Most people think of gratitude as a polite social habit. Say thank you. Keep smiling. But gratitude, when practiced as vibration, is one of the highest emotional signatures in the field. Why? Because gratitude is the frequency of having. When you're truly grateful, you're not wanting, lacking, or chasing. You're receiving. You're acknowledging. It is here. It is done. I recognize the gift. So when you embody gratitude before the evidence shows up, you are becoming the version of yourself who already lives in the new reality. And the quantum, with its unshakable accuracy, mirrors that state. This is why daily emotional practice is essential. Not because the field demands it, but because you do. You're not just shifting thoughts. You are rewiring identity. And identity doesn't change in theory. It changes in repetition. This is what embodiment truly means. Not performing a new self, but being it often enough that your nervous system begins to forget the old story. So every morning you ask, who am I becoming? What does that version of me feel like? How can I practice being that frequency now? And every evening you ask, where did I remember today? What did I forget? Where can I choose again tomorrow? This is not performance. This is devotion. And yes, there will be days when it's hard. Days when the old frequency pulls at your ankles. When the world doesn't respond the way you hoped. When doubt rises like a wave. But even then, especially then, you return to feeling. Not forcing, feeling. You take one breath as your future self. You soften your heart for 3 seconds longer. You speak one sentence with the rhythm of already having. These are not small acts. They are quantum keys. Because the field doesn't care about dramatic gestures. It responds to coherence, no matter how subtle. Here's the truth. When you feel it first, You stop asking the field to deliver something and start becoming the kind of being that naturally receives it. And once receiving becomes normal, manifestation stops being magic and becomes a side effect of your alignment, not a reward, a reflection. Chapter 6. Your nervous system is the portal. You can't out-visualize your nervous system. You can dream big, speak affirmations, set intentions, do the meditations. But if your body does not feel safe to receive what you're calling in, you will unconsciously reject it or sabotage at the moment it arrives. Because the body is the gatekeeper and the nervous system is the gate. Your nervous system is ancient. It has been shaped by millennia of evolution, designed not to help you thrive, but to help you survive. It doesn't ask if something is aligned. It only asks, is this familiar? Is this safe? And when unfamiliarity is coded as threat, your nervous system will contract, even around what your soul has been praying for. This is why love can feel terrifying, why abundance can trigger anxiety, why peace can feel suspicious. Not because you're broken, because your system has learned that chaos is home. Here's the hidden truth. Your body remembers everything your mind forgets. It remembers the silence that meant danger, the smile that meant betrayal, the raised voice that meant you had to disappear. And it formed patterns, loops of tension, breath holding, hyper-awareness. Not to punish you, but to protect you. These responses were brilliant once, but now they become barriers. You cannot stabilize a new timeline while your body is still bracing for an old one. This is why nervous system regulation is not just a wellness practice. It's a spiritual initiation. You are not here to fight your body. You are here to partner with it, to teach a new rhythm, to become a safe space for the frequency you desire, to dissolve the internal alarms that keep collapsing your manifestation back into fear. And you don't do this by demanding change. You do this by building trust moment by moment. You breathe when it tightens. You soften when it flinches. You hold presence when it wants to disappear. The nervous system is a sensory oracle. It tells you instantly and without filter what timeline you're attuned to, not by analyzing your thoughts, but by revealing your patterns. Are you always rushing? Does stillness make you uncomfortable? Do you feel relief when you're unseen? These are not personality traits. These are frequencies, and they shape the way the field interacts with you. If you want to enter a new reality, you must enter it through the body. You must rehearse safety, pleasure, trust, not as concepts, but as physical sensations. Because when your nervous system begins to associate expansion with safety, you stop rejecting your own evolution. You start to open. And openness is where the field flows. The universe doesn't care how badly you want something. It cares how deeply your body feels safe having it. Desire is not enough. Vision is not enough. Even belief is not enough. Because the gatekeeper is the nervous system. And until your body feels safe in the frequency you're calling in, you'll repel it or won't even see the door when it opens. This is not failure. It's misattunement. Your nervous system is a frequency tuner, a magnet, a translator of potential into pattern. And if you don't include the body in your spiritual practice, you're leaving the most powerful instrument behind. So what does it look like to regulate your nervous system for expansion? It looks like this. Noticing when your breath tightens as soon as you imagine being fully seen. Pausing when your shoulders rise because your system remembers that rest was never safe. Staying present in your body when discomfort surfaces without checking out. These micro moments are where timelines shift. Because every time you soften instead of brace, every time you stay instead of flee, you send a new signal. This is safe now. And the field listens, not to your logic, to your presence. This is the beginning of somatic integration. It's not about talking yourself into a new state. It's about rehearsing the vibration with your entire being. You don't just think I am worthy. You practice breathing like someone who knows they're worthy. You walk like someone who trusts their path. You speak like someone who feels safe being heard. This is not pretending. It's becoming. And becoming is a bodily act. Emotional residue will surface. This is part of the process. As you expand, old programs will rise, not to punish, but to be released. Grief, terror, shame, all the feelings your body stored because it didn't feel safe to process them before. Let them come. This is not regression. It is clearing, like smoke leaving a room. These feelings must be witnessed without collapse. Feel them, hold them, breathe through them, but don't re-identify with them. They're not you. They're the echo of a version of you that needed them to survive. You are not surviving anymore. You are receiving, and receiving requires space. So you empty, you ground, you regulate, and in that regulation, a new possibility opens. Your body begins to recognize pleasure is safe, joy is safe, rest is safe, visibility is safe. This is how timelines stabilize, not through control, but through safety. And that safety must be felt in the flesh. Otherwise, the mind will try to ascend, but the body will always pull you back into familiar frequencies. So ask yourself lovingly, where does expansion still feel unsafe? What emotions rise when I imagine having what I desire? What parts of me still equate thriving with threat? Then go to those places, not with force, but with presence. Bring breath, bring patience, bring touch, movement, softness, sound. Let the body speak. Let the body lead. Because when your body finally relaxes into receiving, the field does not hesitate. It responds. You don't need more affirmations. You need more embodiment. You don't need to chase higher timelines. You need to become a stable place for them to land. And that stability, that sacred frequency of readiness, lives not in the stars, but in your skin. Your nervous system is the portal. Honor it, soften into it, and through it, you will step into everything you've always known was yours. Chapter 7. Identity is a frequency. Who you think you are is creating your life more than any dream, ritual, or intention ever could. Not because your thoughts are magic, but because your identity is magnetic. The question is not only what you want, but who do you believe you are? In the space between your wants? Because the field doesn't reflect your words. It reflects your identity signal. And that signal is felt, not in your affirmations, but in your default breath, your unconscious choices, your reactions in quiet moments when no one's watching. Let's define it clearly. Identity is a frequency, not a title, not a job, not even a personality. It's a pattern vibration made up of what you consistently believe is possible for you, what your body expects emotionally, what your subconscious assumes is normal, what your nervous system is calibrated to receive. You don't attract what you desire. You attract what you believe you're a match for. And that belief is not always conscious. In fact, most of your identity lives underground, like the roots of a tree you've never seen, but that silently dictate the shape of the branches above. This is why you can want something deeply, but still repel it vibrationally. Because if you don't believe someone like me can have it, the field doesn't argue. It mirrors. So take a breath and ask gently, who am I when I'm not performing? Who am I in stillness? What story is my identity silently telling the universe? You may be surprised at what you find. You may discover an identity shaped not by truth, but by trauma. An identity that says, I'm a strong one. I don't need help. I'm always the outsider. I have to work twice as hard just to be worthy. I'm never chosen first. These are not facts. They are frequencies. and frequencies can be changed. But you don't change your identity by attacking the old one. You change it by tuning into the version of you who has already remembered a higher truth. Because in the quantum field, all versions of you exist now. The insecure you, the powerful you, the shy, the brave, the doubtful, the radiant. They are not linear steps. They are parallel frequencies, waiting for you to match them with your attention. So the question becomes, who do I choose to embody now? Not to fake, not to pretend, but to remember. Because the highest version of you is not an invention. It is a return. The moment you realize identity is not fixed, you hold in your hands the most sacred technology of transformation. Choice, not surface-level choice, not intellectual preference, but vibrational, embodied, energetic choice. You don't become the next version of yourself by wishing harder. You become them by shifting what you feel familiar. Your identity is built on what you've rehearsed. If you've rehearsed scarcity, then scarcity feels safe. If you've rehearsed invisibility, then being unseen feels like home. If you've rehearsed rejection, then love will feel foreign, even suspicious. This is why the nervous system resists expansion. Not because you don't want it, but because your identity has not yet updated its emotional signature. You are not just changing beliefs. You're changing biochemical normalcy. Let's be clear. You can't think your way into a new identity without feeling your way into it first. Because the body doesn't respond to logic. It responds to emotion. So if you want to shift who you are at the level the universe responds to, you must ask, what emotions are coded into my current self-concept? What emotions would exist in the version of me who already lives in the timeline I desire? Can I begin to feel those emotions now, in this body, even without the outer proof? This is the pivot point, where you stop waiting for reality to validate your new identity and start choosing to stabilize it from the inside out. Let's talk about how this works in real time. Say you want to shift from an identity of I'm always struggling to I am grounded in prosperity. Start small. Start somatic. You ask, how does a prosperous version of me breathe? How does she sit? How does she walk into a room, speak to strangers, handle conflict? What does his nervous system feel like when a bill arrives? When he receives, when he gives? You begin to rehearse the emotional posture of the new identity. And this rehearsal is not fake, it's tuning. Just as a musician tunes their instrument before they play, you are tuning your nervous system to match the rhythm of a new self. And over time, the unfamiliar becomes familiar. The impossible becomes ordinary. And that's when reality shifts. Not because you forced it, but because the field finally had a coherent signal to respond to. Another key element, language. Your identity lives in your language. Your self-concept is encoded in the way you talk about yourself. Even in passing, even as a joke. I'm just bad with money. No one ever really sees me. I always attract the wrong people. These phrases aren't harmless. They're anchors. Every time you repeat them, you reinforce a frequency that the quantum has no choice but to reflect. So the invitation is not to be performative, but to be deliberate, to begin speaking from the place of the new identity, even before the evidence appears. Because that language isn't delusion. It's leadership. You're showing your nervous system what comes next. And yes, your old identity will resist. Of course it will. It's not just an idea. It's a home, a worn-in, predictable home that, even if painful, offers familiarity. But here's the sacred truth. The old self was never the enemy. It was the protector, the version of you who shut down, who stayed small, who braced and bent and tried to earn love, was doing the best they could with the tools they had. We don't kill the old self. We thank them. We release them with grace. And then, with breath and practice and daily choice, We return to the identity that always lived underneath the armor. The self who trusts, the self who receives, the self who knows, I'm allowed to be all of me now. Identity is a frequency, and frequency is fluid. Every moment, the field is asking, who are you being now? Not who you were, not who you said you'd be. Now, and when you choose, fully and without apology, to inhabit the version of you that aligns with your soul's truth. The field doesn't hesitate. It reflects, immediately, elegantly, precisely. Chapter 8. Time is not linear. We are taught from childhood that time moves like an arrow. First this, then that. Cause, effect. Action, consequence. Past creates present. Present creates future. But in the quantum field, this is not how time behaves. Time does not move forward. It expands outward. All possibilities, all versions of you, all future timelines exist now, vibrating at different frequencies. Not distant, not delayed, but parallel. And what you call the future is not a location you travel toward. It's a signal you tune into. Let that sink in. You're not moving through time. You're moving through frequency states. You are not waiting for the future to arrive. You are shifting into the version of now, where the future you already exists. Your highest timeline is already alive. Not 10 years from now, not 5 months away, but pulsing beside you, waiting for your attention. You don't reach that future by hustling harder. You reach it by becoming emotionally and energetically synchronized with it. This is the collapse. This is the shift. When you change your vibration, you don't just attract different outcomes. You change the version of reality you inhabit. But here's the challenge. Your nervous system has been trained to trust sequential time, to believe that change must take time, that healing is slow, that transformation is linear, that success must follow suffering. These are not laws. They are agreements, rooted in collective belief and inherited limitation. But you are not required to honor that timeline. You are free to collapse time by accessing the state of your desired future now. Let's ground this in example. Imagine a version of you that has already created everything you desire. The love, the clarity, the wealth, the inner peace. That version of you does not live in the future. They live in a frequency, and that frequency is accessible right now through breath, stillness, visualization, emotional rehearsal, somatic posture, spoken word, embodied choice. These are not rituals for wishful thinking. They are technologies for time collapse. Every time you step into the frequency of your future self, you bend time, you compress distance, you make the impossible inevitable. But here's the nuance. You don't collapse time by rushing. You collapse time by stabilizing presence. The field does not respond to urgency. It responds to coherence. So the faster way is the still way, the embodied way, the present way, because when you are fully in the now, you become available to every timeline at once. And you can choose, not conceptually, energetically. You can select a new future by becoming the self who lives it. Now, here's a radical truth. Your memory and your imagination are made of the same neurological substance. The same neural circuits fire when you remember the past, as when you visualize the future. To your subconscious, there is no difference between something vividly remembered and something vividly rehearsed. This means you can be traumatized by what hasn't happened yet, and you can be healed by what hasn't happened yet, too. The past does not define you. It only defines what you keep remembering, and the future does not wait for you. It only waits for your permission. Most people live in what can be called time loops. Repetitive patterns. Same emotions. Same results. Different names, faces, jobs, decades, but the same emotional reality recycled. These loops are not punishment. They are frequency stabilizers. If you keep vibrating at the same emotional range. Doubt, fear, unworthiness. Then life has no choice but to mirror versions of reality that reflect those same states. So time appears to repeat, not because it must, but because you haven't shifted the state that selects a different branch of time. This is karma in its most practical sense, not a mystical law of reward and punishment, but the magnetic echo of a repeated identity. The question is not, why is this happening again? The question is, what state am I still living in that continues to match this loop? Here's where you reclaim your power. When you remember that time is nonlinear, you realize that the future is not something you wait for. It is something you rehearse. And you don't rehearse through fantasy. You rehearse through emotion, breath, somatic language, decision, presence. You close your eyes. You tune into the future self who has already broken the loop. You feel their nervous system. You hear their voice, not louder, but clearer. You let your body mimic the feeling of already having become. And slowly, repetition becomes memory. Memory becomes identity. Identity becomes magnetism. And magnetism shapes reality. This is not delusion. This is the field at work. You are not waiting for your future. You are practicing it into form. Let's go deeper. Some days you will feel like you're still inside the old timeline. Triggers arise. Doubt returns. The outer world shows no signs of shift. This is where most people collapse. But if you stay present, you'll begin to see this is not regression. It's integration. The old frequency is surfacing, not to punish, but to be released. It is the shedding of the skin you no longer need. And the only requirement is not to re-identify, to say, I see you, but I'm not that anymore. I bless the self that needed you, and I release you now. This is how you exit the loop. Not with force, with presence. You stop rehearsing the past. You stop forecasting fear, and you stay loyal to the now. That holds the highest timeline open. You are not linear. Time is not linear. Creation is not linear. Every future already exists. Your job is not to create it. Your job is to match it. Not someday. Not after the pain goes away. Not after you feel fully ready. Now. Because now is the only time that ever truly exists. And in the now, you can be anything. Chapter 9, Sacred Disruption. You ask for expansion. You ask to grow, to rise, to embody your highest timeline, to align with your soul's truth. And then, everything began to fall apart. The job, the relationship, the health, the plan, the identity, what you once depended on began to dissolve. What once made sense no longer felt real. What once kept you safe began to feel suffocating. And in that moment, you might have said, what's wrong with me? Why is this happening? Am I being punished? But here's the truth. You are not breaking down. You are being broken open. Disruption is not punishment. It is preparation. It is how the soul makes room for a frequency the body doesn't yet recognize. Because your next timeline doesn't fit into the scaffolding of your current life. It can't. And so, the intelligent chaos begins. You don't lose the job because you're failing. You lose it because the role you were playing no longer matches your becoming. You don't grieve the ending of a relationship because you're unlovable. You grieve it because your heart has begun to crave a deeper resonance, a love that your current capacity can now hold. You don't face illness because you're broken. You face it because your body is calling you inward, toward rest, toward listening, toward realignment. This is sacred disruption. It is your soul intervening, clearing the stage, undoing what is no longer true, to make space for what is. But let's be honest, sacred disruption rarely feels sacred in the moment. It feels like grief, like confusion, like rage, shame, silence, collapse. Because disruption is not tidy. It doesn't ask permission. It tears away the illusion of control. And that tearing can feel like death. But it is not your death. It is the death of an identity that can no longer carry you forward. And if you can stay present, even in the ache, even in the fog, you will begin to see that something deeper is being built beneath the ruins. Not despite the collapse, but through it. This is how quantum leaps often begin. Not with clarity, but with disorientation. Why? Because you're being unhooked from a timeline. You are detaching from the vibration of who you were, so you can begin to resonate with who you are becoming. And in that in-between, the space between identities, everything feels unstable. This instability is not the enemy. It is the portal, because when you no longer know who you are finally available to become who you were always meant to be. The mind will beg for answers during a collapse. It will demand clarity. It will try to label the pain, to fix it, to analyze it, to escape it. But sacred disruption doesn't speak the language of logic. It speaks the language of initiation. And initiation is a soul event. It is what happens when your external world can no longer reflect the truth rising within you. When your old systems, relationships, routines, even beliefs can no longer hold the new frequency your body is being asked to embody, that's when the structure begins to shake. Not because you're lost, but because you're being restructured. And that restructuring happens from the inside out. So what do you do in the midst of it? You stay. You breathe. You let fall. You stop trying to rush back to the comfort of the known, and instead let the unknown reveal its deeper rhythm. This is where you shift from control to connection. Not connection to a plan, but connection to your source, your center, the part of you that doesn't need to know what's next, because it already trusts that what's being made is truer than what's being lost. That part of you, your soul, doesn't fear endings, because it knows that disruption is not chaos. It's precision. It knows what needs to die so that what is authentic can finally live. This is how the quantum field works, too. When a frequency is no longer sustainable, it will collapse, not as punishment, but as liberation. You may call it a breakup, a breakdown, a diagnosis, a dark night, but from the field's perspective, it's a realignment. You are vibrating in a frequency that no longer matched your becoming, and so it began to unravel. The unraveling is not cruelty. It is clarity in disguise. It is making room for resonance. But this is the crucial part. What you do in the in-between, the space after the collapse and before the clarity, shapes the quality of your next timeline. If you numb it, you delay it. If you fight it, you bind yourself to the old. But if you feel it, if you let the grief, rage, confusion, and silence move through you, then the energy doesn't stay trapped. It becomes momentum. You begin to alchemize your pain into power. You stop clinging to what was and start becoming available to what wants to emerge. That emergence doesn't come with a trumpet. It comes softly, like breath returning to your chest after sorrow, like trust where fear used to live, like a whisper saying, "You're not broken, you're becoming." So here is the invitation. Next time something falls apart, ask not, "What did I do wrong?" Ask instead, "What is being cleared? What truth am I now strong enough to embody? What version of me no longer fits in this container? What reality is waiting to be born through this release?" This is how you move from collapse to creation, not by force, but by surrendering with consciousness. And from that surrender place, you don't just survive the disruption, you let it initiate you into a timeline that could never have arrived otherwise. Chapter 10, The Architecture of Belief. Reality is not created by facts. It's created by filters. And those filters are made of belief. What you believe to be true, not what you say you believe, but what your nervous system and subconscious have agreed is true, acts as a kind of scaffolding. That scaffolding forms the walls of your perception, the ceiling of your receiving, the floor beneath your expectations. And most of it was built when you were too young to know you were building anything at all. Belief isn't just mental, it's embodied. You can say, I believe I'm worthy. But if your body tightens when someone praises you, if you feel the urge to deflect or downplay success, then the true belief lives underneath the words. You may say, I believe abundance is natural, but if every time you receive money you brace for loss, then the deeper belief, the one that shapes your timeline, is this isn't safe or it won't last. This is why surface-level mindset work often fails, because you're painting over architecture without shifting the actual foundation. So what is belief, really? It is repetition plus emotion. It is what your system has learned to expect, based on repeated energetic evidence, real or perceived. Most beliefs aren't chosen. They are absorbed from your parents, your early environment, your culture, school, religion, media, memory. And what's most important, beliefs are not about what's true. They're about what feels familiar. If lack was familiar, it becomes believable. If abandonment was familiar, it becomes expected. If being invisible kept you safe, you'll believe that staying small is smart. And so, beliefs become permissions. They tell the field what to reflect and what to withhold. But here's the miracle. Beliefs are not fixed. They're not hard-coded. They're flexible frameworks, and they can be rewritten. Not instantly, not by force, but by displacement. You do not fight an old belief. You create space for a new one, and then practice it until the field accepts it as your new baseline. You install new evidence, emotionally and energetically, until your system says, this is safe now. And when it becomes safe, it becomes magnetic. You are not failing to manifest. You are succeeding in sustaining the world your beliefs allow. Because belief is not passive. It is structural. Like invisible walls, beliefs define what you look for, what you tolerate, what you hold, and what you even recognize as possible. And most of these beliefs aren't yours. They were inherited, handed down silently through generations, sometimes in words, but often through behavior, energy, silence, and survival codes. You didn't choose to believe that love requires self-abandonment. You absorbed it from a mother who gave everything and never received, from a father who only opened when things were perfect, from a culture that equated devotion with depletion. You didn't choose to believe that wealth is dangerous, or that visibility is risky, or that joy is fleeting. These beliefs were installed through repetition plus emotion, which is the formula your subconscious uses to encode reality. And now, you get to interrupt the pattern. So how do you dismantle limiting beliefs? Not by debating them. The subconscious doesn't respond to logic. It responds to emotion and experience. This means you must first feel the old belief in your body. Notice how it lives inside you. What do you contract when you say, I am safe to receive? What physical tension arises when you imagine being fully seen? What emotional reflex kicks in when you hold joy for more than a few seconds? These are not random. They are installations, energetic programs running on autopilot. And your job is not to judge them. Your job is to interrupt them with presence, breath, and new emotional evidence. Let's make this practical. Choose one core belief that no longer serves you. Let's say, I have to work hard to deserve anything. First, bring it into the light. Speak it, write it, own it. Then, trace it. Where did this belief begin? Who modeled it? What version of you needed it to feel safe or lovable? What does it cost you? Now feel it. Let it rise. Let it move. Let it ache. Because what you cannot feel, you cannot free. And finally, replace it. But not with words alone. with state. Practice breathing like someone who believes ease is allowed. Move like someone who trusts rest is productive. Receive like someone whose worth isn't conditional. And do it again and again, not because it's fake, because it's how belief is rebuilt, through embodied repetition plus emotional safety. Remember, your subconscious doesn't believe what's true. It believes what's familiar. So your job isn't to convince yourself of something new. It's to normalize it through daily repetition, somatic regulation, and gentle devotion. Because when the new belief becomes the path of least resistance, the quantum doesn't hesitate. It responds instantly, impersonally, precisely. And here's the sacred paradox. You don't need perfect belief to begin. You just need a willingness to practice something more true than the lie you've outgrown. Even if doubt comes, even if fear visits, you don't collapse back into the old agreement. You hold your center, you breathe, and you say, "Today, I'm building a new world." And you are, one belief at a time. Chapter 11, Magnetism over Effort. What if you didn't need to try so hard? What if your value didn't need to be proven? Through exhaustion, overfunctioning, or constant output? What if your desires could meet you? Not because you chased them, but because you became a match for them? This isn't wishful thinking. This is magnetism. And magnetism is not a mood. It's not seduction. It's not a trick. Magnetism is the natural consequence of coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, nervous system, identity, and energy are moving in the same direction, without contradiction, the field responds instantly. Not because you earned it, because you stopped interrupting it. Effort has its place. It builds muscle. It teaches resilience. It helps develop consistency and integrity. But most people don't use effort as a tool. They use it as an identity. They believe, if I'm not working, I'm not worthy. If I stop doing, I'll lose everything. If I don't earn it, I can't receive it. These beliefs are not noble. They are heavy, and they block the very timelines you're trying to create. Because the field doesn't reward burnout. It reflects frequency, and chronic over-efforting is the frequency of lack. True magnetism begins when you stop pushing and start aligning, when you shift your focus from what more can I do to what state must I be in to receive this effortlessly. This is the difference between forcing versus flowing, performing versus radiating, controlling versus allowing, striving versus stabilizing frequency. You stop manipulating reality like a machine and start harmonizing with it like an instrument. You tune yourself, and in doing so, you become magnetic, not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. So how do we become magnetic? By becoming energetically consistent. This doesn't mean you never wobble. It means your baseline becomes steady enough that the field recognizes your signal and mirrors it with precision. That consistency comes from regulating your nervous system, practicing your desired emotional state, rehearsing self-trust, speaking with clarity and conviction, honoring boundaries, letting go of timelines while staying loyal to the vision. Because the most magnetic person in the room is not the most impressive, it's the most self-anchored. If you only receive when you've suffered enough, if you only relax when everything is perfect, if you only believe when the evidence shows up, then you're not manifesting. You're still bargaining. And the field doesn't speak in bargains. It speaks in resonance. So the question becomes, can you remain anchored in the vibration of having, even when nothing around you looks like it? This is where magnetism is born, not in the performance of perfection, but in the quiet certainty that what you've called in is already on its way. Because the future isn't waiting for your effort. It's waiting for your alignment. Magnetism requires receptivity, and most people aren't wired to receive. They're wired to pursue, to prove, to hustle for worth. But receptivity isn't passive. It's a vibrational posture. To receive well, you must relax your body, soften your expectations, regulate your nervous system's relationship to having, let go of emotional hypervigilance. Trust that stillness isn't stagnation, it's readiness. When the field senses this openness, this inner yes, it flows toward you, because receptivity is not emptiness, it's availability. But here's what interrupts magnetism more than anything: urgency. Urgency says, "It's not here yet. I need to do more. Time is running out. If I don't act now, I'll miss it. I'm behind." And the vibration of urgency is the vibration of lack. It pulls you out of presence. It sends a signal of panic. It clogs the very channel through which your desire would have arrived. You don't become magnetic by needing more. You become magnetic by needing less and feeling whole anyway. From that wholeness, receiving is natural. So how do you stabilize that? With energetic hygiene. You protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. You stop leaking energy to old timelines, outdated roles, or endless proving. You move from intentionality, not anxiety. You notice, am I acting from overflow or from emptiness? You choose pause over panic. You train your nervous system to understand. Slowness is not failure. It is depth. And as you slow down, something profound happens. You begin to see that everything you once chased was already orbiting you, just waiting for you to become still enough to receive it. This is the paradox of magnetism. The less you push, the more you pull. The more you embody, the less you explain, the more you allow, the faster life aligns. Let this truth land gently. You are not here to force miracles. You are here to become a space they can find. And that space, that coherent, trusting, receptive you, is the most magnetic force in the universe. Chapter 12. Wholeness is the portal. There is nothing to fix. There is nothing missing, nothing broken, nothing wrong with you. This is the core wound in the collective psyche. The belief that we are incomplete and that our wholeness must be earned through struggle. This belief drives most spiritual seeking. It turns healing into performance. It turns self-development into self-rejection. And yet the truth remains. You're not here to become whole. You are here to remember that you already are. Most manifestation teachings begin from the assumption of lack. Here's what you don't have, and here's how to get it. But the most powerful quantum shifts begin not with lack, but with wholeness. Because the field does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you believe you are. If you carry the subtle belief that you're incomplete, you will create from that distortion, pulling in more experiences that reinforce the illusion of fragmentation. But when you embody the energy of already being whole, you don't attract what fills the gap. You attract what amplifies your fullness. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is quantum integrity. It means you stop making your desires about fixing yourself. You stop reaching for success to validate your worth. You stop chasing relationships to heal abandonment. You stop overperforming to earn love. Instead, you say, I want this, not because I need it to complete me, but because it reflects the joy of who I already am. This is clean creation. This is whole frequency. And the quantum field mirrors wholeness with effortless accuracy. But how do we begin to embody that when life has taught us otherwise? We begin by gently turning inward and noticing the places where we still believe we are not enough. The moment we flinch after praise, the discomfort of receiving without giving back, the guilt after resting, the anxiety when being fully seen. These are not flaws. They are entry points. Each one marks a place where an old identity, shaped by survival, shame, or silence, still believes your value is conditional. Let those places rise, not to judge, but to witness with love. Because what you can see without shrinking, you can heal without effort. Wholeness is not a destination. It is a frequency. It is the soft, steady current beneath your pain, your progress, your past. It is the self untouched by survival, conditioning, or achievement. You don't arrive at wholeness. You return to it. And that return often comes through deep simplicity, slowing down long enough to hear your own breath, noticing the part of you that tries to earn love and choosing not to believe it, letting yourself rest before you feel depleted, holding the truth that your value never fluctuated, even on your worst days. Wholeness is not a grand achievement. It's a gentle remembering. And in that remembering, everything changes. When you live from wholeness, you stop trying to manifest a different life because you're dissatisfied with who you are. Instead, desire becomes a reflection of your overflow. Not compensation, but expression. You don't manifest to prove anything. You manifest to celebrate who you've become and what you attract from that state of coherence. Peace and quiet self-honor is not louder or flashier. It's cleaner. It's more you. It's not what you used to think you needed to feel worthy. It's what naturally harmonizes with the version of you who already knows they are whole. This is when life begins to flow, not because you figured it out, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself. You stopped creating from urgency, proving through perfection, delaying joy, outsourcing truth, earning rest. You chose softness over survival, presence over performance, being over becoming. And from that space, everything reorganizes. Because wholeness is not just your truth. It is the strongest magnetic frequency in the universe. Why? Because it holds no contradiction. It doesn't wobble. It doesn't chase. It doesn't defend. It simply is. And what simply is has nothing to prove, only to receive. You were taught to chase wholeness. But now you see, the portal was never outside of you. It was your breath, your presence, your decision to return again and again to the self beneath the noise. This is the ground where miracles land, not because you manipulated them, but because you were stable enough to hold them. And now you are. Chapter 13, the timeline of devotion. There is a timeline you cannot collapse through hype. You cannot manipulate it with intensity. You cannot access it with force. It is revealed only through one thing: devotion. Not devotion to outcome, not devotion to speed, but devotion to embodiment, to the daily, gentle, sometimes quiet choice, to show up as the version of you who has already remembered what's true. Devotion is not romantic. It is often invisible, unapplauded, unshared. It is the way you breathe when no one is watching, the words you speak to yourself when you fall short, the energy you hold when the evidence hasn't arrived yet. It is the willingness to build your new reality, brick by brick, even when the old one is still whispering in your ear. Devotion is what happens after the breakthrough, after the insight, after the decision, when the question becomes, will you stay loyal to your new timeline, even when the old one comes knocking? There is no bypass here. You will be tempted to collapse into the familiar, to overwork, to perform, to hustle for worth, to seek external validation when doubt arises. But the timeline of devotion is not chosen once. It is chosen again and again, in the quiet hour before your day begins, in the breath you choose instead of reacting, in the trust you hold when fear wants to take the wheel. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. Devotion says, even if nothing changes today, I will remain aligned with the truth of who I am becoming. And that alignment, not intensity, is what holds timelines in place. It is easy to be committed when it's working, when synchronicities unfold, when signs appear, when the path is clear and the energy is high. But the real power, the true coherence, is forged in the unseen hours. It is built in moments when you feel nothing changing and still choose to remain aligned. This is the timeline of devotion. It's not about doing more. It's about becoming the frequency that keeps showing up even when your mind says it's not working, because the field isn't watching what you get. It's listening to who you're being when you don't get what you want. And if you remain rooted in truth, even there, especially there, you become undeniable. Devotion is not emotional. It's energetic consistency. It's saying, I regulate when it would be easier to numb. I speak the new story when the old one still echoes. I ground when I could spiral. I soften instead of closing. I trust, not blindly but bodily. And each time you do, you anchor a new timeline. You make it more real than the old one. Not through intensity, but through repetition with reverence. Let's talk about sacred repetition. You've been conditioned to think that repetition is boring, that doing the same practice daily dilutes its power. But in reality, repetition is what stabilizes your frequency. If you only tune your vibration when you're inspired, your field will be inconsistent. But when you become someone who embodies the same signal, in joy, in stillness, in fear, in uncertainty, you no longer hope for alignment. You are alignment. And that alignment, that deep coherence between body, emotion, vision, and action, creates a signal so clean, the universe responds with precision. Devotion does not mean staying the same. It means staying true to the deepest resonance available to you, even as you evolve. Sometimes devotion looks like stillness. Sometimes it looks like pivot. Sometimes it looks like letting go of what used to be true in order to hold what is true now. You are not here to perform a timeline. You are here to partner with it, to walk with it, to live it so fully that it stops being a goal and becomes your normal. So ask yourself gently, what am I truly devoted to? Is it an outcome? Or is it a way of being? Am I chasing a reality or becoming the self who lives it? The timeline of devotion requires patience, not because it's slow, but because it moves at the speed of integration. It unfolds not through your force, but through your ability to remain present without collapsing. And if you can hold that presence long enough, you'll wake up one day and realize that the reality you thought you had to chase has become the ground beneath your feet. Chapter 14, Becoming the Oracle. You have spent lifetimes looking outward, for signs, for permission, for proof, for prophecy. You've asked cards, mentors, teachers, stars, and synchronicities to tell you who you are, what to do, and what's next. But the time has come to stop searching, not because the answers are hidden, but because they've always been inside you. You don't need more guidance. You need to become the oracle. What is the oracle? The oracle is not someone with special gifts. The oracle is someone who has learned to trust their inner frequency. Above all else, it is the part of you that no longer waits for clarity to arrive, because it is clarity. It is the body that speaks in sensation. It is the emotion that rises in silence. It is the knowing that doesn't argue. It just is. To become the oracle is to embody your own source code so completely that the outside world becomes secondary, not irrelevant, but no longer primary, because you have come home to the only voice that ever truly mattered. But to become the oracle, you must first disentangle from spiritual dependency, because many on the path confuse intuition with anxiety, guidance with avoidance, and connection with control. They check the signs 10 times. They wait for alignment instead of making aligned choices. They delay action until it's guaranteed to be safe. But the oracle is not passive. The oracle is anchored. You do not ask your intuition to save you from discomfort. You allow it to guide you through discomfort with integrity and trust. You stop performing spiritual rituals to avoid responsibility, and instead live each moment as a sacred dialogue with the field. True intuition is not dramatic. It's not loud. It doesn't beg for your attention. It whispers, clear, direct, unshaken. And because it whispers, most people miss it. Not because it's gone, but because their nervous system is still tuned to fear. To become the oracle, you must first deprogram the fear frequency. That makes you confuse anxiety with instinct, because trauma often speaks first. It's fast. It's protective. It's trying to keep you alive, not aligned. But intuition is calm. It doesn't rush. It doesn't justify. It doesn't convince. It simply says, this way. So how do you hear it? By becoming quiet enough to listen. Not just in silence, but in stillness of motive. You stop trying to get an answer you want. You stop manipulating your own guidance to match your ego's plan. You sit, you breathe, you soften your grip on should, and you ask, what feels deeply true, even if it doesn't make sense yet? What path feels clean, not just correct? What choice would the clearest version of me make, not the safest? And then you honor that answer, not because it's comfortable, but because it's coherent. The more you listen, the clearer it becomes. And over time, you stop needing signs. You stop outsourcing your power to other people's certainty. Because you have become the oracle. You walk into a room, and your energy speaks louder than your words. You make decisions others don't understand, but they work. You move in ways that defy logic, but create precision. And you are no longer shaken by delay, by doubt, by detour. Because your guidance doesn't come from circumstance. It comes from source, from you. This is the end of spiritual hierarchy. No more waiting for a teacher to tell you what you already know. No more shape-shifting to earn clarity. You're the oracle now. And because you are, your life becomes a living transmission. Not of answers, but of alignment. Not of control, but of trust. Not of prediction, but of presence. And when you live from presence, you don't just predict the future. You create it. Integration is no longer optional. You're not here to play a role. You are here to embody a frequency. And the frequency of the oracle is stillness, clarity, sovereignty, and truth. This is not the end of your journey. This is the beginning of your return to the version of you who doesn't need to seek, perform, or wait, but simply knows, because they're already whole, already enough, already here. And if you felt something stir within you, if you heard truth in these words, if you remembered who you are, then let this be your invitation. You are ready. Now. Not someday. Now. And if you enjoyed this content, comment below and tell us where you're from. Share this message with someone you love and subscribe to the channel. We post new videos every day to nourish your soul.